The thing nobody tells you about meeting your boyfriend's identical twin for the first time is that your nervous system doesn't know the difference. My palms were slightly damp as Aaron and I pulled up to the Harlow Foundation Gala, the kind of black tie event held in one of Chicago's grand hotels, the kind with ice sculptures and open bars and silent auction items priced at what I made in 3 months. The kind of event where you stand very straight and make sure your laugh doesn't come out too loud. Aaron had been preparing me for 2 weeks. His father, Walter, who'd built Harlow Industries from a small commercial development firm into a Midwestern empire, spanning real estate, logistics, and several other things Aaron got vague about when I asked. His mother, Constance, who'd grown up old Chicago money and had opinions about everything from property values to the correct thread count for guest towels. His sister Paige, a corporate attorney who read people the way she read briefs, efficiently and without mercy. His younger brother Miles, still in his MBA program, and somehow the loudest person in any room he entered. And then there was the other one. Asher handles the investment side, Aaron said, his voice going to that very careful, very neutral place it only went when something mattered. Acquisitions, the deals that. A pause, like he was choosing words from a limited menu. The side of the business I stepped away from. I asked what that meant. It means he's good at finding value in things other people have written off. Aaron kept his eyes on the road. And he's patient about it. He said it like a warning. I filed it and moved on. I'd spent 6 years in urban landscape design, negotiating with city planners, aldermen, construction crews, and clients who wanted a fully realized public green space on a budget that barely covered the gravel. One complicated man at a family charity event seemed manageable. I was wrong about so many things that night. The ballroom was everything I'd expected, and somehow still more than I was ready for. Aaron's family greeted me in descending order of intimidation. Walter took both my hands when he shook one of them, which is the move of a man who ran for city council twice and still had the instincts. Constance looked at my dress, a deep green wrap I'd spent 3 days agonizing over, with an expression I couldn't read, and spent the rest of the evening trying to decode. Paige asked measured questions about my firm in a way that felt conversational, but had the structure of a deposition. Miles knocked over a champagne flute within the first 30 minutes, then spent the rest of the night making it part of his personality. I kept bracing for something to crack me. It didn't. Aaron stayed close, his hand finding the small of my back every time a conversation turned complicated, and between the two of us we had a silent agreement. When the noise got to be too much, I found him, squeezed his hand twice. He'd squeeze back 3 times, safe. Still here, okay. 4 months in, and we'd built a whole language out of small gestures. 2 hours into the gala, he leaned close. I'm going to grab us drinks. The East Bar has the actual good stuff. He kissed my temple. 10 minutes, you're doing great. He disappeared into the crowd. I stood near the tall windows overlooking the Chicago River, watching the lights move on the water, trying to hold myself steady. The Harlow family moved through events like this the way they moved through their offices, like the space had been built to accommodate them. I was still figuring out where I stood in relation to all of it. I saw him about 7 minutes later. Or I thought I did. The figure was standing near the far windows, slightly separate from the nearest cluster of guests, watching the room. Same dark jacket as Aaron's. Same set of the shoulders. That particular way Aaron had of holding himself, when he was observing rather than participating, weight shifted back slightly, one hand tucked in his jacket pocket. I recognized it the way you recognize something that belongs to you. The sight of it made my chest ease. I crossed the ballroom, navigating around conversations and catering staff, my heels quiet on the marble. I came up behind him, touched his hand, squeezed twice. His hand was warm, marginally larger than I expected, maybe, but I'd had 2 glasses of champagne and I wasn't measuring. He squeezed back. 3 times, exactly right. I exhaled fully for the first time all night, leaned slightly in, keeping my voice low under the string quartet, carrying on nearby. Okay, I need to tell you something. I think your mother looked at my dress when we walked in, and I cannot stop replaying it. Every time I talk to her, I'm thinking about it. Is that in my head? The man turned around. He was not Aaron. He was Aaron, completely and entirely, the same face, same jaw, same dark eyes. But the expression in those eyes was nothing I had ever seen on Aaron's face. It was precise and absolutely still, and quietly amused in a way that had no warmth in it at all, or rather, a different kind of warmth. The kind that doesn't comfort you so much as hold your attention. "She doesn't hate your dress," he said. His voice was a fraction lower than Aaron's, or I imagined it was. "She's impressed. In this family, those two things can look identical from the outside." I made a sound that was not language. "You were looking for my brother." Flat statement, no question mark. I took a step back. My hand was still near his and I pulled it away. "You squeezed back." Something moved at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile, the suggestion of one, force of habit. "That is not a normal reflex." "No," he agreed, his eyes moving across my face with an unhurried attention that I felt like a hand on my arm. "It isn't." I found my composure somewhere underneath the embarrassment and assembled it quickly. "I'm so sorry. I'm Mara. I'm with Aaron, I know." He held out his hand. Formal, deliberate, a reset. "Asher Harlow." I shook it. He held my hand for exactly 1 beat longer than the gesture required before releasing it. "Mara," he said, "just my name." But the way he said it, like he was making a note of something, sent a current through me that I had no interest in examining. Aaron materialized 2 minutes later with our drinks, looked between us, and went momentarily very still before his face rearranged itself into something easy and welcoming. "I see you two met." "She found me," Asher said, with a look at his brother that I couldn't fully interpret. "The lighting," I said. "From behind your—" "It happens," Aaron said, and handed me my glass. The tone of it told me it didn't happen that often. The rest of the evening passed in a controlled blur. Asher spoke very little. He moved through the room the way certain people do, quietly, and yet every group he passed through seemed to reorganize itself slightly without anyone acknowledging why. He ended up at our table for dessert, 3 seats away, and I was aware of his stillness the way you're aware of a sound in a quiet house. Not alarming, just impossible to stop tracking. He looked at me twice across the table. The second time, I'd already been looking. Aaron was attentive all evening, said the right things to his parents, kept his hand near mine. I kept telling myself, this is the man you came with. This is the man who knows your coffee order and texts you before 7 a.m. because he knows you're already awake, and who has never once made you feel like you were being studied. I drove home and lay awake thinking about the way Asher Harlow had said my name. I told myself it was the champagne. I wasn't convincing. My best friend Blythe had a supernatural ability to read my face that 8 years of friendship had only sharpened. She showed up at my office 2 days after the gala with iced coffees and an expression that said she already knew something was wrong before I opened my mouth. I lasted about 40 seconds before I told her everything. She listened, sipped her coffee, waited until I was finished. "So," she said, "you grabbed the wrong twin's hand, leaned in, and immediately told him your most vulnerable thought about his mother." I thought he was Aaron. And then he squeezed back. Which was a deeply strange thing to do, yeah. She tilted her head. Was he attractive? Not in the abstract. Specifically to you, in a way Aaron isn't. I opened my mouth, closed it. "Oh no," she said quietly. "It doesn't mean anything," I said. "Strange situation, nervous system misfire, open bar. Aaron is stable and kind, and has never played a single game with me, which is genuinely rare, and I'm not giving that up over one weird moment at a gala." Say that again, without the voice you use when you're convincing yourself. I threw a pen at her. She moved it out of the way before it reached her. "I'm just saying be careful," she said. "Twins are complicated enough. Twins where one of them runs the investment side of a family empire that Aaron clearly doesn't want to talk about in any detail. That's a different level of complicated. The problem with trying to keep your distance from someone is that it requires you to think about them constantly in order to do it successfully. 3 weeks. I tracked the time like a bruise I kept pressing to see if it had faded. It hadn't. He texted from an unknown number on a Tuesday morning. "The Northside Greenway, the Meridian parcels. There's a rezoning issue coming up before City Council. You should know before your client does. I stared at it for a long time. The information was specific and accurate, and it would have been a bad client call if I'd been blindsided. I saved the number and didn't respond. You're welcome, came the follow-up, 4 days later. I have your contact from the gala sign-in. Apologies for the informality. I didn't respond to that one either. But I didn't delete either message. I noticed that. It felt significant in a way I didn't want to examine. The second time I saw him alone was at a Chicago Architecture Foundation luncheon, 6 weeks after the gala. Harlow Industries was announcing a sponsorship. My firm had a seat at the table for a green space initiative we'd partnered on. I saw him before he saw me, which gave me 10 seconds of false confidence, before he turned and located me from across the room, with a precision that suggested he'd been aware of my presence for longer than he'd let on. He crossed to me without hurrying. Mara. Mr. Harlow, I needed something to hide behind. Asher, he said, I think we're past that. I'm not sure we are. You saved the number. No response, that was enough. Have lunch with me, he said. One conversation. There are things you should understand about my family, about what you're walking into with Aaron, and I'd rather you hear them from me directly than piece them together later. It was the kind of offer I couldn't logically refuse. I told myself that's why I said yes. We sat in a corner of the hotel restaurant, and he talked, and what struck me most was how little he flattered himself. He told me the shape of his family's business without making it glamorous, told me what Aaron had chosen and why, told me what he had chosen and why, with the matter-of-fact quality of someone who'd long since made peace with the accounting of his own decisions. Do you regret it? I asked. Staying in the middle of it instead of stepping back like Aaron did? No. Regret requires believing there was a better option. I made the choice I could live with. That's not the same as making the right choice. He looked at me for a moment that went on a beat longer than conversation required. No, he said. It isn't. You're right. I hadn't expected him to agree. I wasn't sure what I'd expected. Why are you telling me all of this? I said. Because Aaron has never brought someone to a family event before. That means you matter to him. And because... He stopped, started over. Because I've been thinking about you since the night you grabbed my hand and told me in confidence that my mother's expression was keeping you up at night. And I'd rather be honest about that than manage it quietly and have you find out later. That honesty landed in the center of my chest and sat there like a warm coal, uncomfortable, impossible to ignore. Asher, I'm not asking you to do anything. I'm asking you to stop lying to yourself. That's all. He picked up his coffee. In my experience, that's usually the hardest part. I went back to my office and stared at a site plan for half an hour, without processing a single line. Aaron noticed the shift. He was perceptive that way, not controlling, not accusatory, just quietly attuned. He called on a Thursday evening and asked if something was wrong, and I said no, and the word tasted like a small betrayal. It's Asher, he said finally. A statement, not a question. Something in it that was exhausted rather than angry. Nothing has happened, I said. True, and also insufficient. Something is happening. Aaron's voice was careful and tired. I've watched my whole life. He sees something he wants and he's patient about it, and eventually, he stopped. I'm not blaming you. I just need you to see it clearly. Make a real decision, not one that happens to you while you're looking somewhere else. He was being scrupulously fair, and the fairness of it made everything worse. Do you love me? He asked quietly. The silence answered. He gave me 1 week. Blythe showed up at the Northside project site on day 4 with cold brew and no patience for further deliberation. You look awful, she said. Thank you. What is left to think about, Mara? Genuinely, list the open questions. Whether I'm a person who blows up a good relationship because someone interesting looked at me. That's not what this is, and you know it. She sat next to me on the concrete barrier. Aaron is good. He's really genuinely good. But you are not in love with him, and you've known that for longer than you've been willing to admit. Staying isn't loyalty. It's just comfortable. She was right. I'd known she was going to be right before she opened her mouth. Aaron deserves someone who isn't dividing herself, I said. Then stop dividing yourself, she said. For his sake and yours. I called Asher at 8 that evening. He came to my apartment. I made coffee for something to do with my hands. He sat at my kitchen counter and looked at me with that complete attention he always brought to a room. The world slightly out of focus around whoever or whatever he'd decided to actually see. I don't know what this makes me, I said. Human, he said, the specific kind that fights herself longer than necessary before deciding to stop. Aaron is going to be hurt. Yes. Your family is going to have opinions. Yes. And you are, I gestured vaguely in his direction, complicated, in ways I don't fully understand yet. Accurate. He reached across the counter and covered my hand with his. Mara, I'm not going to tell you what to choose, but I'm going to ask you one thing. Okay. When you're with Aaron, do you feel like yourself? Or do you feel like the version of yourself that's easiest for someone else to be around? I looked at his hand over mine. The truth was that I'd been performing a very convincing version of contentment for months, and I'd only understood that I was performing when the performance cracked the night a stranger turned around at a gala, and nothing about his face was strange at all. Sparrow, he said quietly. I looked up. What? You build things. Parks, greenways, little pockets of life where the city keeps trying to pave everything flat, small and deliberate and harder to maintain than anyone gives you credit for. The corner of his mouth moved. Sparrow. Something about it broke me open in the best possible way. I hadn't expected him to be able to do that. This is a terrible idea, I said. Probably. You're the kind of person who plays 4 moves ahead. At minimum. And I need you to understand. I stopped. Steadied myself. I'm not choosing you because you're intense and unpredictable and that sounds exciting. I'm choosing you because I feel like myself when I'm with you. Sharp edges and all. I need you to know that's the reason. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he said, I know, that's why I waited. I have to tell Aaron in person, I said. Tomorrow. He deserves that. I'll be here when it's done. Aaron was already at his desk when I knocked the next morning. He looked up, and his face told me he'd been expecting this, and had hoped, quietly, that he was wrong about himself. I sat across from him. I didn't let myself soften past what was kind. You've been nothing but honest with me, I said, and good, and you deserved better than someone who wasn't fully present. But, he said, I have feelings for Asher, real ones, and staying with you while that's true isn't fair to either of us. Aaron was quiet. He looked out his window at the skyline, his father's skyline, the clean version of it that he'd chosen. He's going to be a challenge, he said finally. I know. He challenges everything, especially people he actually respects. He met my eyes. I could tell that night at the gala. You pushed back at him and he went completely still, and Asher only does that when something genuinely holds his attention. He paused. I'm not angry. I want to be. It would probably feel better. You're allowed to be angry. It won't help. He walked me to his office door, stood there with his hand on the frame, and then, I hope he knows what he has, I mean that. I made it to the elevator before I let myself feel the weight of it. The first Harlow dinner with Asher and me arriving together was exactly what I'd expected and somehow still harder. Constance met us at the door, studied me for a moment, then gripped my shoulders and looked at me steadily. You've moved from one of my sons to the other, she said, with no cushioning. I hope you understand what that means in this family. I do. Asher has not brought anyone here, not once. That tells me this is not casual. Don't be careless with it. She released me. Now come in. Walter made his mother's sauerbraten and it will change your life. Aaron's seat was empty. He hadn't come. Paige was precisely civil. Miles broke the tension with 3 bad jokes and apologized for 2 of them. Walter watched me across the table with the eyes of a man who'd built something out of correctly reading people for 40 years. You picked the complicated one, he said during dessert, direct as a line item. He picked me first, I said. I just stopped arguing with it. Walter looked at Asher. Some compressed communication passed between them that I didn't have the vocabulary for yet. Fair enough, Walter said. Aaron came to dinner 6 weeks later, No announcement. He just walked in, said hello to his mother, took a drink from Miles, and sat down. When our eyes met, his expression held something that was working its way from wounded toward resolved. Not there yet, but moving. He and Asher stood together in the hallway after dinner for a few minutes. I wasn't meant to hear. "She's good for you," Aaron said. "Don't waste it." Asher was quiet for a moment. "I know. I'm sorry for how it happened, Aaron. I mean that." "You could have walked away." "No," Asher said. "Just the fact of it, no defense. I couldn't, and you know that." Aaron left without saying goodbye to me that evening, but he came back the next month, and the month after. Slowly, in the way actual healing works, not in one clean resolution, but in small increments, the way you build something that's meant to last. Months out from that charity gala, what I know is this: the mistake was not a detour, it was a beginning. I spent weeks trying to talk myself back onto the path I'd planned, safe, sensible, no complications, and all I did was exhaust myself while the thing I was avoiding got harder to avoid. Asher is still the kind of person who operates 3 steps ahead of most rooms. He still calls me Sparrow in front of his family, which makes Paige exhale with great patience and makes Miles absolutely lose his mind every single time. He still moves through the gray areas of his work with a calm that sometimes unsettles me, and when it does, I ask him directly, and he answers directly, because the one thing he has never been with me is anything other than honest. That's what was missing before. Not excitement, not danger. Just someone who told me the truth without softening it first. Aaron, by all accounts from Miles, is doing well. There's someone in Denver, apparently. Someone uncomplicated. Someone who doesn't spend charity galas making accidental contact with the wrong person and then spending weeks pretending she doesn't know why she's still thinking about it. I'm glad. That's not a complicated feeling. It's just true. Sometimes the thing that changes everything looks like a mistake. You reach for a hand in a dim ballroom and get the wrong one. You say something that was meant for someone else. The man turns around, and there's a face you already know, wearing an expression you've never seen before. And eventually you understand that the only real mistake would have been pretending you hadn't felt it at all.